Status update for May 26, 2023, day 457 of the war, end of the date update. Also catch up for May 2025. So for those who are just waiting for the updates for the Frontline, there is really not much going on. Both sides are preparing for offensive, counter-offensive. That's obviously coming. But I'll provide some additional details once we get to that point. But if that's the only thing you're looking for, then there is really feel free to skip this this video. Now let's switch to strategic developments that are happening, and I have a reason why we have this map here, and we have Poland, Belarus, Russia, and Kaliningrad. Also, we'll discuss a little bit Sweden. So the situation is getting tense north of Ukraine. So first of all, Russia deployed, as you've probably seen on the news, deployed tactical nuclear missiles to Belarus. And other thing that's happening is now Russia is not allowing Polish truckers to go into Belarus or Russia, and Poland did the same thing. So essentially the whole border is completely blocked. This also implies that probably they're not allowing trucks to go to Kaliningrad, which also means that is essentially in blockade or near blockade. There's obviously supplies through the sea, but that's just not always viable option. So the situation is getting really tense between Poland and then Belarus and Russia on the other hand, and even to the point that Polish, I think, general said that they should be prepared for the uprising in Belarus, and that Polish troops will be helping, and so on. So the rhetoric is really getting very, very, how to say, intense, the best way to say it. And then also related to all of this region, let's call it like Baltic Sea region. Sweden, the relationship between Russia and Sweden are becoming also very, let's say, not even cold, but frozen. Russia is closing its consulate in Göteborg, I think, which is second largest city in Sweden. And I think Sweden is doing something similar. They expelling diplomats on both sides. So the the situation is also becoming extremely tense, not to the point that how it is between Poland and Russia and Belarus on the other hand. And make no mistake, Lithuania is in the same boat as Poland. They all experienced Soviet rule, and even before Russian Empire's rule, so they know what it is. So you need to convince them to, let's say, to be on the guard, and including supporting Ukraine. So this is just kind of like update what's going on north of Ukraine, and things getting tense there as well. And then let's talk a little bit about F-16 for Ukraine. So Ukrainian government, political top, military top, I'm not sure. I think it's really coming from political top, is asking for 48 F-16, and there is looks like Ukraine is going to get them. I would say my assessment, it's completely waste of, say, money, resources, really not what Ukraine needs. And let me explain why. So if you remember, I made a video where I showed those F-35 and then F-22 versus Chinese equivalents and so on. So the prior version between the F, just as a reminder, F-35 is I'd say cheaper, lower quality version of F-22. It's kind of like a pair. And so you have relatively few of F-22, and then F-35 is sort of intended to be mass production, and even then it cannot be really produced in large quantities because I would say extreme monopolization in the military industrial complex around the world, let's put it this way. And so what happens is the same pair was existed in sort of prior generation, and that pair is F-15, as you can see here, and then also F-16. So F-15 is sort of your equivalent of F-22, and then F-16 is your equivalent of F-35, right? Cheaper, more maneuverable, but it's actually F-16 is truly sort of cheap, lower quality, but it also more maneuverable. So there is definitely sort of a role for this airplane. So and the equivalent of F-15 for their sort of former Soviet Union was MiG-31. This is what you see here. And Russia currently has about 250 of those. They definitely superior, as I explained that F-15 is better than F-16. There's no question about they faster and so on. So the same is MiG. It's faster and so in air-to-air fight, most likely F-16 will lose. So as you can imagine, if Ukraine has 48 F-16 and Russia has at least 250 of MiG-31, there's no change basically to the situation. Just even from the pure air superiority perspective, right? And we're not even not talking about like Su-35 that are equivalent of F-16, which Russia has also plenty. So in other words, this attempt to get this F-16 is more of sort of internal propaganda game in Ukraine than truly and actually solving any problems, which again goes back to what I've been saying before of extreme level of incompetence in Ukrainian political top that is really clueless and has no idea how to sort of have a vision, positive vision for this war, for how to defend Ukraine in a positive way. And this is just another example of that. That's why I say that this is a loss of resources, because it would be much better for Ukraine to get another, let's say, 500, 155 millimeter howitzers, plus large number of shells for them. That would do so much more on the front line than this F-16. Nevertheless, for uneducated people who don't know anything, that sounds like magic wand that resolves that this 48 airplanes will resolve problems and somehow this Wunderwaffe for Germany in 1945. And so that's what's really happening in this area, and looks like Ukraine will get it, but as I said, it's not going to change anything. And just for those who are curious, how Ukraine is using this Storm Shadow missiles against Russian assets. And they are being launched from Su-24, which is really old Soviet tactical bomber. But as you can see, there's no problem to figure out how to launch Western rockets or missiles, whatever you want to use, from even old Soviet equipment, because Su-24 is really old, I would say, military junk. So again, the problem is not even so much about the airplanes. It would have been much better to get advanced air-to-air missiles that could be launched literally from MiG-29 or Su-27 that Ukraine has. So that would do the same. There's will advance Ukraine closer to having air superiority than just basically this F-16s. But this is sort of what's going on in that part of, in that sort of area. Now I want to switch a little bit and talk a little bit about the financial situation, specifically in the US. So And as you can see, that first I want to look at this stress in the U.S. banking system. It's slowly subsiding, as you can see. So it's the integrative number is what I call synthetic, which is sum of primary credit, bank term funding program, and other credit. It's at 288 billion. So it's definitely going down, not significantly, not fast, but it's definitely on downward trend, and it's sort of new low since the beginning of the crisis. One concerning item, though, is this FX. The FX swaps were opened again between the U.S. Federal Reserve and major Western central banks, which means that there is a shortage of the US dollars in the world outside of US. It's still a small amount, just 2 billion. That's why you barely see it here. But this is sort of concerning a negative trend here. Also, another, I would say, data point that's not supporting this initial thought that there is a decline in the stress in the banking system is the interest rate that's being charged on bank term funding program. It went up. It's close to 5.2, which is, as you can see, all-time high. That's not a sign that the stress is going away. So this is kind of like a mixed, unclear picture to extent. I would say from a big picture perspective, as I said, the fundamental rule still holds, which means as long as the interest rates, short-term interest rates in the US are high, it's between 5 to 5.25%, the reserves, the deposits will be fleeing US banking system, and it will create stress there. Although it looks for now optically okay. And even there's another data point that's showing like things are sort of also stabilizing and not going in a negative direction, at least. So this is the deposits in the U.S. banking system. So you see, as you see, this latest number showing slight uptick in the deposits, in the amount of deposits. So basically, depositors are not taking money away from the U.S. banking system. So again, this is speaking, going back to this one, sort of supports, corroborates this situation here with this borrowing from the Federal Reserve by the banks, which means that if they have deposits, they don't need to borrow as much from the Federal Reserve, so they don't borrow as a result. And so this story for now, I would say. This is what we sort of seeing at this moment. Let's put it this way. Then a couple more topics on finance and economy. First of all, Turkey is having this weekend elections. I believe it's on Sunday. Looking at what is Turkish currency doing, it looks like the expectation that the current Turkish president is gonna win, because the Turkish lira is going down, basically losing its value, which means that financial world in Turkey is betting on his re-election, and as I mentioned before, his empire building is undermining Turkish economy. Effectively they have negative foreign exchange reserves, which means on accrual basis country is effectively bankrupt. On a cash basis that's not the case, obviously, and it's far from there. But country is really difficult economic situation. At the same time, Turkish president can give a masterclass in politics, international politics. He really managed to pull a lot of benefits from Ukraine, from Russia, from places, from everywhere he could. So from that perspective, he definitely gets highest ranking. But in the end of the day, economy really drives everything else, and without working economy, you cannot do politics. So the importance of this re-election of the current Turkish president is that this whole grain deal depends kind of on him, and he was strong pusher for the grain deal. He managed to find leverage against Russia to allow Ukrainian export of grain. At the same time, Russia did not get anything in exchange. Essentially, Russia cannot really export grains, and what they really want to do is export ammonia. There is a pipeline that sort of kind of goes somewhere here where I'm showing, and it goes to Odessa, and it comes from Russia, from large, I think one of the biggest Russian producers of fertilizer, and ammonia is precursor for making nitrogen-based fertilizer. It's called urea, and so they really want to export that to the world markets, obviously to earn money, to earn foreign currency, which they desperately need right now, and it's being blocked. And also the other part is connecting at least one Russian bank to the SWIFT system, so you can receive payments for all of this agricultural export or agricultural related exports. And it's not really happening. This grain deal was extended till July 18, and Russia is sending clear signals that they don't really want to extend it, because obviously they don't get anything out of it. Well, nominally they don't get anything. What they really get, they're getting this like black or gray import that's coming. Russia needs to buy all sort of things from the West, and Turkey is essentially buying it from the West and then resells to Russia. And that's another, great business for Turkey, because they making money for not doing essentially anything. And so that's what Russia gets, and Turkey believes that that's good enough. And for that reason, Russia should allow grain deal. And so this grain deal still exists, and more likely than not that it will get extended, but you never know. Anything is possible. It's obviously extremely unpredictable. Also, China was sort of chiming in on that, and also kind of like responding to Russia, saying that they want the grain deal be extended. And the reason for that, because most of the grain that leaves Ukraine actually goes to China. China is the largest buyer of Ukrainian grain, and so they will put. So it looks like they will also put pressure on Russia to allow grain exports from Ukraine. And then, actually, speaking of China, there's another sort of item between Russia and China. So it looks like at least 30 Russian banks were connected to Chinese banking payment system. It's called cross-border interbank payment system. I think CIPS is a short name for it. So basically, it's a Chinese equivalent of SWIFT. And so what's really going to happen is that once Russian, and they are being connected, sort of as we speak, these banks being connected, and then they will be able to do payments automatically. And also, what also means that Chinese banks will become like sort of agents of the Russian banks to deal with the rest of the world. So basically, like Chinese financial banking system will become kind of like a front for the Russian financial and banking system, so they can do the payments. That's really what's behind all of that. Then another topic on China, this time Ukraine. No surprise, you probably have seen that what China wants and pressures Ukraine to accept is that, whatever Russia captured, you agree to that, and we have some sort of ceasefire and sort of situation like that. It's obviously totally unacceptable for Ukraine. No surprise there. Well, it was probably surprise to Ukrainian president, Ukrainian political top, which was prior to the war, they had some connections to China. They were even lobbying Chinese interest in Ukraine, even saying how communism is wonderful and things of that nature. This was, I think, in like in 2020. So the Ukrainian president and his party definitely have very strong connection to China. They cannot sort of show their face right now because obviously China is clearly stating that Ukraine should cede its territories to Russia. But behind the scenes, they are sort of big supporters of China because they like sort of totalitarian system in China, and they were hopeful to somehow build that in Ukraine eventually, which I don't think is going to happen anyways. But that's a hopes. Now let's switch to the situation on the front line. And first, the situation along the state border is obviously intense. No changes there. No new sort of incursions from Ukrainian side into the Russian territory. For now, it's quiet. From that perspective, it's not really quiet. There is always a lot of artillery fire, all of this UAV attacks and so on, rocket attacks from both sides. So there is no shortage of that situation, quite intense there. Now let's jump to North Lugansk front line. Things here are quiet, as I sort of mentioned before, and probably for more than a month, probably like 2 months, as I think it's been quiet. This is definitely not a strategic section of the front line, at least not at this moment. Now let's move to North Donbass front line, where things were active. Now they are pretty much dead. There are some weak Ukrainian attacks straight north and south of Bakhmut that essentially don't go anywhere. The situation stalled, and actually, when I mentioned that Russian command brought in 200th Brigade from Avdiivka area, and to actually beef up defenses and probably replace Wagner mercenaries, and they probably will bring more than that. Because Wagner Group was definitely larger than one brigade, even it's sort of shadow itself, but it's still much larger than one brigade. So what really that meant, immediately situation around Avdiivka stabilized, and the Russian attacks around Avdiivka and Petsky stopped because Russian side does not have enough resources to continue attacks there at this point. So as you can, this is kind of like your result of pulling Wagner mercenaries from the front line. It really takes away attacking power from the Russian military command. And that really what this really means is, if we look, let's just move it a little bit further, situation is going to be stable here around Bakhmut, as I said before. Both sides don't have enough resources to basically punch through in either side. Ukrainian side, I would say has resources, but I don't think that's how they're going to be sort of applied. And so for now, the situation is stable till that highly expected Ukrainian offensive. So again, I just provisionally shown 200th Brigade here, but it's probably going to be replacing Wagner mercenaries, and probably there will be more Russian units coming here. And as you can see, they are not coming from sort of reserves. They are coming from other section of the front line, which shows to us that it's thin basically on the Russian side. There is not enough resources, and that's why I said before in the previous video that new mobilization is inevitable in Russia. It's just a question of if Russian political leadership is going to be reactive or proactive. Basically, if Ukrainian offensive is successful and the front line crashes, then they will do this mobilization, similar how it was in September of 2022, or they started like, let's say, in a week or two in sort of expectation of this offensive or concurrently, and so on. So we'll see how it's gonna. We don't know how it's gonna play out. I bet that it's gonna be probably more reactive, given the past experiences and fully realizing that this is not popular. Nobody wants to go to frontline and die, where chances are pretty high. So it's obviously how to say, easy for Russian population to sit and watch all of this action on TV, but when you actually need to go there, things are changing immediately for most people. Then that's it for the this Donbass, North Donbass front line. Let's just move to central Donbass, and as I said, things are pretty much quiet here. Russian side is lacking resources to attack. Ukrainian side kind of the same boat. The only place where Russian forces are still attacking this Marinka, which is truly turned into Verdun on this in Ukraine, and looks totally like that. Looks totally World War One situation, and the Russian success is sort of similar. I don't know, whatever it is. 500 meters, 1 kilometer, they advanced, but that's pretty much all they can show since February 24, 2022. This is basically attacks since the beginning, day one of the war, and there's not much really to show for that. Then let's move to Zaporizhya front line. Things here are quiet for now. As we said, this is where most likely Ukrainian side is going to be looking for decisive victory as in sort of additional sort of supporting evidence for that this is the main place of future attack. There were several attacks against Russian rear. So the Berdyansk was attacked, Tokmak, Melitopol, and Mariupol. So essentially, all of the key towns and cities in this area where Russian has storage of their ammunition, probably fuel, and so on. And sort of don't have details exactly. Most likely, it's ammunition for the most part because that's the most critical resource. That's where you can hit the hardest for both sides, by the way. And by the way, on the topic of that, if you remember about like 2 weeks ago or so, there was a very successful Russian attack against Ukrainian ammunition depot in Khmelnytsky here, if you remember. So the head of Ukrainian security services, or whatever it's called, intelligence services for this region was fired, apparently for basically allowing this attack to happen. And it again highlights that that attack was very painful for Ukraine. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.